providing you with the tools you need in your job search. Job Hunting 101.
Welcome to another Job Hunting 101 series. Today's topic is going to be in job search mistakes, tips for not ruining your chances. Hi, I'm Jay Rivera-Costa, local veteran employment representative with Tampa Bay WorkForce Alliance, and today I'm accompanied by two professionals that will introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Ashley Jiraki. I'm a human resource specialist specializing in recruiting. I work with Wilson HCG and Wilson HR.
And I'm Dr. James Good. I'm a HR manager, recruiter. I work with Hillsborough County Public Schools here in Tampa, Florida.
Well, today we're going to talk about some job search mistake that we can make as a job seeker and the chances that we had to ruin it. Some of those mistakes are major.
They can be major. I think lack of preparation is the number one mistake. You have to prepare yourself for that interview. You can't show that you're not prepared in the interview because you won't be able to do that counterpunch.
And also to add to that, some of them, the mistakes are minor. Some of the mistakes you might not know that you're making. So we're here to help you iron those out.
Let's talk about applying for the job. In my line of work, I talk with job seekers all day long. And we talk about job search. We start with the resume and cover letters. So let's help our job seekers out. What shouldn't a job seeker do during an initial job search? And you can answer in any order, it really doesn't matter.
With planning your cover letter and your resume, you want to critique it and tailor it to that specific job, to that specific company. You want to make sure that the recruiter, the human resource professional, does not view your email as quote-unquote junk mail. You want to make sure that it's very specific to that job.
Research the company or the organization that you're sending those documents to, because it really doesn't look good when you have the wrong name on that cover letter or on the resume. I'm seeking employment at, and it's the wrong company.
Oh, so don't use the same cover letter over and over.
Correct. Research it and do it appropriately.
Absolutely.
I get that. One of the things that I also heard about cover letters is you should cover things that will not be covered in the resume, so it's not to repeat the same thing again in the resume.
Correct, and I think you should try to keep the rule of thumb would be perhaps your resume short, in the sense that perhaps 2 pages back and front, and at the end, certainly I would recommend, because the business I'm in, and I think most employers would appreciate it, the old line at the bottom that says, you know, references available upon request. Many times employers do want to check perhaps those references ahead of time, and you should give that employer the opportunity to do so. Many won't. They'll check the references after the interview process, but have that information at their fingertips.
To add to that, the cover letter, like you said, can also have additional information on there that might not be in your resume. Like you were saying, the resume, needs to be on the shorter side, 1 to 2 pages. So if you have something that you feel might be an addition, go ahead and put it in the cover letter.
Okay, so I'm a job seeker. I'm looking for a job. I need to get organized. Okay, so before I write the resume or the cover letter, I need to do a job search. So what tips or what advice would you give a job seeker? Where to start? Where do I start?
A lot of individuals, specifically today, I just received a question on, well, how do I know this job is real? How do I know that these human resource department managers are really looking for this specific title? So what you want to do is contact the human resource office if you can. Just let them know that you're interested in the position. Oftentimes you can research on different websites, Monster, Career Builder, those types of websites are decent.
And the internet can be your friend as well. You really need to research ahead of time. If you know a company, whether it's small, medium, or large, research it before you actually contact that company so they know something about it, or certainly before you go in on the interview. Know something about that company so you can speak appropriately at the interview.
Definitely. Nowadays, the job is so competitive out there that a person does not apply for just one position. Say with the school system, they probably would apply to multiple positions. How What tips?
Well, in an organization, we're a public organization because we're a large entity with over 25,000 employees. But you have to know that you do have a generic application. Basically, it's a one-size application, fits all the different positions. You do have to give us enough information so that we can pre-qualify you. But know the different processes that organizations have. They may have, Walmart will have one type of application, a much smaller company, different, but know what it is that they need and make sure you complete it, because an incomplete application is a rejected application.
Definitely make sure that you complete your application to the fullest. A lot of different companies have assessment tests that go along with the application. Like he was saying earlier, references. They might ask for your references in the beginning of the process.
Well, that's true, particularly in the public system, probably.
The reference checking actually is a state mandate. We have to do checking of references upon an offer of employment. So prior to, you're going to have those references contacted, and somebody's going to be asking about your previous employment history and what kind of an employee you were. So certainly list the people that can be contacted. Just a little tip on that would be their name, their title, and certainly a contact or email where they can be reached easily.
And I guess one of the good practice also will be if they're applying for multiple positions with a company or a corporation, probably create like a spreadsheet and kind of put down who they applied, what position they applied, when did they apply, and where did they find that.
You would be researching multiple companies and applying for multiple positions. You want to make sure that when you do get that call from the human resource representative, that you know exactly what the position entails. What are the duties? What's the company? What's their product? What do they make? So you want to make sure that you keep that organized.
Okay, so the person went and looked for the job. They kind of find some of the job that matched their skills and qualification. Now they're ready to do their resume and cover letter. Let's talk a little bit about the cover letters. What was the first tip that you would recommend on the cover letter? I
would keep it short to one page as a cover letter. Make it personal, as we said earlier in the show. Make sure you get the right person's name and title on there to match the company that you're sending that cover letter and resume to. And then also tailor make your resume for that particular position. Don't make it so generic that it could be for anything, because that does show. And then be sure that you have the skill set that they're looking for, research what's needed, and make sure that's listed on your resume.
Absolutely. A lot of the skill sets are researched through by the actual computer. So you want to make sure that if those jobs have specific skill sets, you want to make sure they're listed, whether it's in the cover letter or in your resume.
Right, in the resume. And things that you'll be looking on a resume or cover letter. What would name some of those things? Spelling
mistakes, please spell check it over. Certainly the names, as we've said before, of the individuals that you're sending to, make sure that they're spelled correctly, the person's title and name, but also just the regular grammar, make sure it's there, make sure it's neat.
I would love to share with everyone is make sure that if you're currently working and you have your skill sets listed or duties listed below that, make sure it's maybe in the present tense. And then the previous roles that you have done, make sure that that's in the past tense. And make sure all those tenses are the same. I have seen a lot of different variations with that.
Wow,
good point.
I like that. How long would you think that, say when you see the resume or the application for the first time, how long do you have to look at an application?
Not very long at all. Recruiters nowadays will only take about 7 seconds to review a resume, so you have to really shine.
You honestly do. And there's a fine line between putting on something that's so attention-gathering as to be overbearing, but you do sometimes want to put out that references that does strike an eye. You don't want it to be so gaudy that, it's not really going to be taken seriously. But I think sometimes using a different font or perhaps a different kind of a drawing to draw the person's eye to your resume might be something that's appropriate.
So one of the things probably in the cover letter that you want to say is how you're going to make a difference, what do you bring to this company, corporation?
Absolutely.
And then on the resume, tailor it or written specifically for each one of those companies, as sort of if you were speaking with each one of those HR directors or human resources hiring authorities. And Dr. Good, you mentioned about references sometimes I provide up front. What tips would you give a job seeker right now when they
Well,
providing those
a great
jobs?
tip is, not only do you list the references, in our field it's a little different because we are under district mandates as well as state mandates, but give that reference a heads up. Don't list them, and then all of a sudden they get a phone call out of the blue, and then they don't know that they were being listed as a reference. They may not give you a good reference. And nowadays, I think with the accountability factor, people who are doing the reference checking and people who are actually giving a reference are going to be more honest than perhaps in the past. So be sure you list someone who you did a good job for and that they're going to give you that positive reference. It doesn't have to be exemplary across the board. It just has to be good.
I would say make sure that your references is not someone from your family. They
another good point.
Absolutely, they want to make sure that you have contacts of previous coworkers, maybe previous bosses, and if you don't have that, perhaps you can volunteer at your local. Habitat for Humanity or whatever the case is, and put those individuals down as references.
So a good idea would be like providing a copy of your application or the resume and highlight the areas that you want that reference to cover for that time period. Okay, and I definitely agree. We need to let them know. That's the last thing, that you get a phone call and somebody's asking about somebody that worked with you and you don't remember, or at that time they caught you off guard. I like that. So the person created, they found the job they're looking for, they created I'm going to use the perfect cover letter and the perfect resume. Now they have the interview. They got that phone call. This is not the pre-screening. This is the actual interview. They have that phone call. What shouldn't a job seeker do when interviewing? And let's cover from the time they get the phone call to they actually go to the interview. Again, any particular one?
Well, to start with the interview, from the human resource manager, when you're getting the call to come in for the interview, you want to make sure to begin with addressing the individual as Mr. or Ms. To make sure that you do present yourself very formally until the time arises where you can address them by the first person. You want to make sure also that you are very flexible. The times that they give you, the managers are very busy, so you want to make sure that you can reschedule whatever you can to make it into the interview for that time. And then once you do go into the office to do the interview, you want to make sure that you're addressing each individual that you meet with courtesy and respect, because you never know who's going to be talking to that hiring manager or human resources in regards to your presentation.
So from the minute I get the phone call to the minute I go to the parking lot, meet the receptionist, if it is the receptionist, it could be one of the hiring managers.
That's correct. I think that the term I'd like to use is actually the gatekeeper, because you never know. That particular gatekeeper, that may be the receptionist, it may be someone who's assisting the HR manager for that particular vacancy, but they will definitely, after the interview's done, give feedback. And your impression that you make, you may think that you're just impressing the hiring manager, but you weren't exactly appropriate with that gatekeeper. That may not help you in that interview.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I also have heard before and like to make emphasis, how do you dress for the interview? Say, I want to be a teacher, or I want to be a manager, or I want to be a construction person. What tips do we have?
I think the key piece for any interview, whether it be for a classically professional setting that requires a certification of some kind, or even if it's something that is a trade, the key piece is you're interviewing, the key word would be professional. Dress professionally, because you never know exactly what the setting is going to be, but if you dress professionally, that will help with your interview.
Absolutely. I always mention to my candidates that if they have a question on something that they feel like they might be able to wear, if they're questioning anything at all, don't wear it. It's always best to be the most professional you can be.
I like that.
Dress for success, and certainly perhaps the tattoos, which are so popular now, you might want to cover them up, because it may not be the appropriate setting for the interview. You can do clothing covered up, perhaps makeup does wonders with that, but the different jewelry you wear, just exactly what you're talking about, Ashley, I think is appropriate. Dress for success, I think, is the best way to say it.
So it really doesn't matter if it's a permanent job or just a seasonal job. the person should dress, like if the job is going to be permanent or this is going to be their career?
Absolutely. I find with many different companies, whether it's a contracting job, just maybe for 3 months, or whether it's a contract to perm or straight permanent role, they're very interested in this individual, their professionalism from head to toe, resume, everything, because you might be a possible permanent position, a possible permanent candidate. So there's always an opportunity for you.
I like that. And another things that, sometimes we don't address is, and sometimes we do it out of respect, is if a gentleman is wearing an earring or 2 earrings, sometimes during an interview, would that be appropriate or inappropriate? Or for that matter, for the ladies, a small earring or a big earring? Mm-hmm. What would you?
I don't think there's an honest rule of thumb that you really should or should not, but what you're doing is remembering the word professional, and if you don't think it's professional, as Ashley said earlier, then don't. The dress, the jewelry, the tattoos, all of that. Think professional and label yourself that as you walk into that interview, because when you walk in there, you want to exude that that you're wanting that job, that you're the person for their job. As you walk out, that job is yours.
So it's not just what I think is professional, it's what the employer think is professional. So I don't need to, because I might think if I just don't wear a jacket, I'm dressed professional to be a teacher.
Some of the studies I've read that in the first 30 seconds of the interview, the first impression's been set. So it's not so much what you'll even say or what's on the paper, what your qualifications are. That first 30-second impression has set the tone for you're getting that job or not.
Mm-hmm, absolutely, and it doesn't even really have to be because of the big earrings or lack thereof. It can be your body language as well.
Okay, so I know my background, I talk a lot with my hands, so at least I try to make it natural, but I also know the things that I at least recommend is to have something to write on, and when you feel that you need to move your hand, maybe take notes. In speaking of taking notes, communication, when you're communicating with the interviewer, acronyms like for the military, folks with military background, what would you recommend?
When you're speaking, make sure that the employer, the potential employer, knows what you're talking about, because you may come from an environment where you know perfectly well what those 3 or 4 or 5 letters mean. They won't necessarily, unless they come from that similar background. So speak clearly, plainly, and it comes back to the beginning of what we were talking about today. Make sure you're prepared for the interview. Bring something to write with. Take notes.
Absolutely, and I liked your comment earlier about if you feel nervous and you need to move your hands, go ahead and write something down, because the hiring manager will feel like, okay, what I said matters to you, and you're writing it down and showing interest.
And definitely, when answering the questions, I mean, we not always know the answer to every question, but when answering the question, what tips do we have to give our job seekers?
I think for me, it really does speak powerfully to not speak in circles. Sometimes when we are nervous in an interview, we'll speak to speak, but we won't really answer the question because we don't know the answer. I think it'll speak very powerfully if you very assuredly say, I don't know, but I'll get back to you on that. That's a strength.
Absolutely, and also if you're answering a question, you want to make sure that you answer it. You don't give a yes or no answer, and stop talking. Finish your statement, because a lot of the times employers will let you talk to see if you're going to divulge any information that might be used against you. So you want to be careful.
So kind of listen more than you talk.
Absolutely.
And we were talking about earlier about acronyms, and one of the acronyms that we use in the military, my background, was KISS, keep it simple and short. So do address the employer's need, but don't talk too long. Just address what the employer is asking or the needs of the employer at the time. What else can we tell a job seeker during the interview?
When I interview, one of the types of questions I always weave in, I ask it differently, depending on the job that I'm interviewing or the job seeker I'm interviewing, but I always weave in a question that asks about their strengths and their weaknesses. And it tells me whether, one, they've studied that job, and then I know what kind of employee they're going to be and what kind of training I'll need for that employee. It's not a knockout question, but I'll know right away who's my best candidate for the group that I interviewed.
Absolutely, and know your weaknesses, because if you don't know your weaknesses, that's going to show as you don't know your strengths. So make sure that when you're answering that question, what are your weaknesses, and you're going in for a sales job, don't say selling. You can say finance, since it's not a finance job, but just make sure that you do know your weaknesses and you know where you stand with your strengths.
So would it be wise to also add, I know my weakness, but I'm also doing something about it?
Absolutely.
Correct.
I think that's a good idea.
And going back to the resume too, do not embellish the resume.
Wow.
No falsehoods. Certainly don't put on there things that you think you'd like the employer. Well, if they know I have this, then they'll hire me. If you get checked and that resume turns out to not to be true, you certainly won't get the job, or potentially you could be fired.
Mm-hmm. You don't want to burn a bridge. You want to definitely keep lines of communication open with all companies.
In companies now, they probably talk to each other, or one company may own junior companies. And also, during the interview, would it be a good time to also talk about the gaps in the resume?
Yes, I think so. Sometimes there are very excellent reasons why a potential employee would have a gap, staying at home, raising a family, perhaps doing more training, getting more education. But be prepared to answer the gaps. If they see, a 5-year gap, 3-year gap on your resume, the employer is going to ask you. And it's okay to be honest and say it's because of this reason. Just be honest with the employer.
Mm-hmm.
What about if you don't hear the question? Is it okay to ask the employer to repeat the question?
Absolutely. Just address it in a very professional manner. Pardon me, I'm sorry, Mr. or Mrs. Can you please repeat that? It also helps out with, if you're not sure on how to answer that question, go ahead and ask them to repeat it. It'll give you a couple more seconds to really divulge that answer that you really want to give them.
So it could be not just to repeat the question, but probably rephrase the question, perhaps?
Correct. As you begin your answer, just rephrase the question, as it gives you time to develop the answer that you're going to say.
Okay. And a dumb would be, don't ask every single question. Could you repeat that question?
Correct. I would not do that.
Okay. We agree on that one. Okay. Is there such thing as a wrong answer?
There can be, but I think the key piece would be on what we just touched upon a few seconds ago, was do not make something up, especially a falsehood or an untruth, because you're possibly going to get caught on that, and that one would be grounds for termination if you had become employed, or certainly would not get you that particular job if it did not check out as they were looking into hiring you potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of do not inflate your answers.
Do not inflate the answers, do not inflate the resume, be truthful.
Mm-hmm.
What about when they ask you that question, that dreaded question, tell me about your former employer?
Absolutely. You're always going to get that question, and you always want to be positive. I know you might want to say, my old manager, he was mean, but you never want to say that. You want to be positive, be truthful about why you left that employer, but certainly stay positive.
Accentuate the positive and also minimize the negative. If they do, get granular and go into, well, tell me what was bad about that situation, you can be honest, just don't accentuate the negative.
Mm-hmm. So basically, and I'm going to just kind of paraphrase what both of you said, was we can tell a bad story in a positive way.
Absolutely.
Okay. What about, so we are done with the interview, we feel that we did good or we did okay. What's our next step?
Mm-hmm. Next step would definitely be a thank you letter. Is always a nice, positive kind of closing. It's always nice to remind everyone, hey, I've interviewed for this position. What were your thoughts? I definitely recommend thank you letters. Handwritten is definitely nice. Nowadays, it's just very easy to write a simple email.
Correct. You should always follow up, because it lets the potential employer know that if they've not filled that vacancy, you're still available. It also transmits that thought of, hey, thank you for taking the time to interview me. I appreciate that. But it lets them know, hey, it puts you back into their forethought. I'm still here and I'm available. Thank you very much.
So another thing that would you recommend that if during that, while you're writing that thank you letter, you could also ask for the job? Again, if you didn't do it at the interview or you did at the interview, this is another chance to ask for the job, would you?
Or please keep me in mind for future vacancies and openings.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. One of the co-workers that I had, and I just want to share a short story with you, he used to, when he met the person, will shake hands and get their names while he was shaking hands with everybody, and he will come prepared already to the interview with the thank you notes. All he had to do was add the name and just add a little blur of what was discussed during the interview. What are your thoughts on that?
That's excellent, because people will forget after the interview to do that follow-up. And that follow-up is so important, because you may be the candidate. When they're seeing the persistence of the person that's looking for the position, they're following up, they're beginning that networking. So I would definitely follow up with a thank you note, know who you're addressing it to, and get that to them in a timely fashion. There's a rule of thumb for a specific date, possibly not, but certainly within 5 business days.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I was going to address that, but you covered it already. Okay, and what about during the job search, cover letter, resume, and interview process? Who else do you think? Is it just the interviewer, or who else do you think?
Absolutely, it's every person that you meet with, every person that you sort of interview with. So you're meeting with your HR representative. You should definitely thank them. If there's 3 different people in the interview, 3 different managers, you want to thank them each individually. If you go to a higher up interview, you want to thank the VP or the president, definitely each individual.
And we can't forget that gatekeeper, because sometimes you may minimize that it's simply that little receptionist, that person that's out there, but they will definitely give feedback to the potential employer about how you acted from the minute you walked in.
30 seconds or less. Any final advice?
Do follow up, network, know the employer. Walking in unprepared is a really bad sign.
Yes, research the company, research the position, know how you fit into the position, turn off your cell phones, don't look at the time.
There you have it. The do's and don'ts for job searching during the interview, before, during, and after the interview. And that's all the time we have for today. I would like to thank Dr. James Goof, Human Resources Manager with the Hillsborough County Public School System.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And also Ms. Ashley Jiraki, Human Resources Recruiter at Wilson HR and Wilson ACG. Thank you for being here today and helping us with this topic. And we'd like to thank the viewers for being here today. Hopefully you got the knowledge and you were taking notes of the do's and don'ts for the topic that we covered today. Have a great day.
Change your life. Learn TV and internet video production skills at TBCN in Tampa. Become a skilled video producer quickly and inexpensively. Learn audio, editing, lighting, and camera basics. Produce multi-camera videos for TV, the internet, business, or pleasure.
Welcome to my live call-in show on Tampa Bay Community Network. You too can learn to produce and star in your own video programming, or you can have TBCN staff do it for you.
Call TBCN at 813-977-5200 today and change your life. Visit our website at tbcn.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn.